right, we will call this work session for June 2nd, 2025 to order, and I'll recognize our city manager, Miles Braswell, to go through the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. Tonight on consent, you have 11 items. The first few items, B1, are minutes to the September 3rd, 2024 regular city council meeting, the minutes to the May 5th, 2025 regular city council meeting, and the November 4th, 2024 regular city council meeting. Item B2 is the approval of the city council workshop meeting minutes from April 21st, 2025. Two items in item B3, which are both special meeting minutes from November 4th, 2024 and April 28th, 2025.
And I had some edits to the various meeting minutes.
Correct. Yes, sir. Thank you. Item B4 is the approval of the closed session minutes, and those have been passed around by our city clerk and will be collected at the end of the meeting. Item B5 is the old City Hall lease. We currently lease Old City Hall to the Montrose Area Chamber of Commerce. The new lease that we have prepared is a lease for a 5-year period at a monthly rate of $750. And based on general statutes, we have to bring a resolution to council for consideration at the July 7th, 2025 meeting. We'll also advertise a public notice in the Gazette. Mayor Pro Tem did send a few edits with the lease agreement, so I would recommend that this lease agreement is not approved with consent, given that there are various items in here. Plus, there are two items that Mayor Pro Tem pointed out that we need a definition for the upfit improvements and retained assets, so I will include that and bring that back to the July 7th meeting.
So just to be clear, we're removing this from the consent agenda?
Well, there's a couple parts to it, so we have to set the public hearing for it, so we can still do that. But we would approve the lease in July, and what we're going to approve will be slightly different than what's in the consent.
Gotcha, but that has no bearing on us setting the, okay.
No, we got to set the hearing with 30 days notice.
So this is just to set the hearing, so the section in there about the lease can't be for more than 10 years, and only if the council determines that the property will not be needed by the city for the term.
Great.
That has no impact because obviously the design study that's going on, that would preclude us from being able to do that if we renew this lease.
Correct. And Mayor Pro Tem pointed that out during this morning's meeting with the city attorney. What we would recommend is that the renovations would require Montcross to move out. Then we would notify them in the appropriate time frame, amend the lease possibly to bring them back if they need to, but provide that notice. Item B6 is budget amendment. It recognizes event sponsorship revenue in the current fiscal year of $30,815. This budget amendment also increases the Main Street event by that same amount of $30,815. And these are the event expenses that have been raised since July 1st, 2024. Item B7 is budget amendment number 20. This proposed budget amendment appropriates $39,980 from the unassigned fund balance in the water and sewer fund and increases the debt service in the water and sewer fund by that same amount of $39,980. This is in relation to the Division of Water Infrastructure grant and loan for our lead service line replacement and the lead service line inventory. So this budget amendment will fund the first principal payment related to the loan. Item B8 is the consideration of approval of a downtown facade enhancement grant for 111 South Main Street. The amount is $750 to fund that the grant. The Main Street Advisory Board has reviewed and recommended moving the facade enhancement grant application forward for approval in the by City Council for Belmont High building. Number B9 is the acknowledgement of Rod Wilhite for service on the Environmental Sustainability Board. He has served on this board for quite some time. He has been he served on it for 6 years, with 4 of those being either chairman or vice chairman, so they want to say thank you for his tenure on the board. Agenda item B10 is a resolution supporting designation of the South Fork Passage Trail as a state trail. This is the Carolina Thread Trail, the Catawba Lands Conservancy, Dana Stowe Conservancy, and the Catawba River Keeper. They seek support from the City of Belmont for Senate Bill 329, and that recognizes this South Fork Passage Trail as a state trail facility. And so this is a resolution of support. Item B11, which is the final item, is the ABC Board Chair appointment. The ABC Board Chairman, Tim Summers, does not seek reappointment after his term expires on June 30th, 2025. And so he is recommending that council appoint Jonathan Wilson as the new ABC Board Chairman. Mr. Summers did speak with all the board members, and they all have agreed to this appointment. So based on general statutes, 18B-700, you all have to appoint the board member there. And those are the consent items. I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Miles. Any questions and any items on the consent agenda? All right, well, if that's the case, then we will transition forward, and I will call the regular City Council meeting of June 2nd, 2025, in the City of Belmont to order. If everyone would please rise for the invocation. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all the blessings you've bestowed in our city. We ask that you continue to watch over our city and its residents. Help give us the wisdom to make decisions for the good of the city tonight, and continue to bestow your blessings on Belmont, the state of North Carolina, and our country, the United States of America. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
At this time, I would ask the Gaston County Sheriff's Department Color Guard to come forward to present the colors. And I would ask Councilman Charlie Hill to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Before we begin the regular agenda, we have several recognitions and acknowledgments. First, the city manager would like to recognize our newly hired and newly started fire chief.
Correct, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Tonight, we have a special introduction, so I'd ask Jeremy Kennedy and his family if they would like to come to the podium. Or just Chief Kennedy.
I don't think they were expecting.
So, you all are aware that Chief Davis, he put in his retirement for the second time a couple months ago. And he did a really good job to set the fire department up for success. And we really appreciate Chief Davis for all the things that he had done here in the city of Belmont. We moved into this phase where we had to hire a new chief. And we decided to contract with a consultant to go through the process with us. We hired developmental associates, and as Chief could probably attest, it's a very rigorous process that he went through. Of course, there's an application phase. There's also a phone interview that we conducted, and then it moved into an assessment panel where there was like 4 different assessments. You had a written assessment, a coaching assessment, a department head meeting assessment. You did all that before you even made it to the interview phase. And then once he actually came to the site and interviewed, he had a presentation in front of a panel of people. And I'm happy to say that the process played out like it should have, because we hired the best qualified candidate that we possibly could. Chief Kennedy is the 5th fire chief here in the city of Belmont, and he is currently employed by Charlotte Fire Department as a battalion chief, where he's worked for the past 28 years. He holds a bachelor's degree in fire and emergency services. He's a part-time fire training instructor at Gaston College. He was a previous assistant fire chief at the North Carolina Air National Guard. He's a previous assistant chief at the East Gaston Volunteer Fire Department. He holds numerous certifications, and we all know that his knowledge in the fire service industry and his leadership qualities will serve the city of Belmont well. So I introduce you to our new chief, Kennedy.
I look forward to working with all of you, and we'll make the city, we'll carry out the mission that you guys drive us to carry out. So I appreciate your time, and thanks for allowing me.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Rachel, and my son, Hunter.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to our new fire chief Kennedy, and of course, thank you to our interim chief Hardy for all of his efforts over these last few months to sort of bridge the gap. Yes. Thank you. Next, we have an award acknowledgement for School Resource Officer of the Year from Gaston County Schools, Pip Kang, and to present this acknowledgement is Chief of Police Corky Falls.
Good evening, members of council, mayor, pro tem, manager. Tonight I'm honored to recognize, come on up, Pip. Tonight I'm honored to recognize School Resource Officer Pip Kang. Pip is currently assigned to the J.B. Page Elementary School. Pip was recently awarded the SRO of the Year for Gaston County. That means all of the resource officers across Gaston County. She was awarded this award at their 2025 Evening of Excellence ceremony. It was a great night, and Pip has been employed with the Belmont Police Department for 12 years. The last 7 years, she's been at Page Elementary School. She's been there through a lot of our kids, raised up a lot of our kids through school.
Yeah.
She graduated from South Point High School, Go Red Raiders, in 1999, and graduated BLET at Gaston College in 2013. Her training accomplishments are that she has her intermediate law enforcement certificate. She actually serves on a Region 6 representative with the North Carolina Association of School Resource Officers. She's certified in self-defense tactics for female officers, amongst many other things she's certified in. I won't read all of it because then we will be here late. This award recognizes not just Pip's dedication, but her daily commitment to the safety and well-being of our kids and the success of every student and staff member at J.P. Page Elementary School. Please join me in congratulating Pip Kane for her commitment to the city of Belmont as well as the community she serves very diligently.
Oh, don't you want to stay for the rest of the meeting? Are we good technology-wise? Are we, okay, just want to make sure. All right, at this time we have a proclamation to read, and this sort of is at the behest of Councilman Hill, but we want to recognize a sacrifice that was made by some National Guardsmen, including one of our Belmont residents in connection with a plane crash some years ago. So I'll read a proclamation recognizing the North Carolina Air National Guardsmen from MAFS 7 who gave their lives fighting a wildfire in South Dakota. Whereas Lieutenant Colonel Paul K. Michael, Major Joseph M. McCormick, Major Ryan S. David, Senior Master Sergeant Roberts S. Cannon, Chief Master Sergeant Andy Honeycutt, and Master Sergeant Joshua Marlowe were members of the North Carolina Air National Guardsmen from the 145th Airlift Wing. And whereas Major Joseph Joe M. McCormick, being born in Newberry, South Carolina, lived in Belmont with his family. And whereas the particular aircraft flown by these guardsmen is a modular airborne firefighting system, MAFS C-130H3 air tanker, tail number 93-1458, also referred to as MAFS 7. And whereas MAFS 7 was deployed to fight the White Draw Fire near Edgemont, South Dakota. And whereas on July 1st, 2012, at approximately 17:38 local time, MAFS 7 was dropping retardant to slow the spread of the wildfire when the aircraft encountered turbulent air and crashed, killing Lieutenant Colonel Paul K. Michael, Major Joseph M. McCormick, Major Ryan S. David, and Senior Master Sergeant Roberts S. Cannon. And whereas Chief Master Sergeant Andy Honeycutt and Master Sergeant Joshua Marlowe survived but suffered significant injuries. And whereas these men who perished and survived were all serving their country and fellow citizens to the best of their abilities while protecting United States Forest Service land from a wildland fire. And whereas these guardsmen are truly honored and designated as heroes by the city of Belmont, now, therefore, be it proclaimed that Monday, July 1st, 2025, is hereby designated as MAFS 7 Day in the city of Belmont in an effort to recognize all those who serve in our various military branches and as a way to say thank you to the families of the servicemen of MAFS 7. Adopted this second day of June, 2025. Thank you.
How about you? All family members here?
Yes.
Those are recognized.
Yes, I believe we have family members of Major McCormick here. They would like to be recognized.
You want me to introduce them, or do you want to introduce them? I'll introduce
You
them.
can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Todd Kinlaw. I married Major McCormick's wife sometime after he was killed, but this is Heather White McCormick. Kinlaw, this is Margaret Ann McCormick, his daughter. This is Henry McCormick and Thomas McCormick. And we have another son in Raleigh. His name is Luke McCormick. He couldn't be here. He's tied up in work and whatnot, and it was very difficult for him to get here. But on behalf of my family and on behalf of these folks, I want to say thank you guys for, get a little emotional here. But thank you guys for recognizing this family, and don't forget the other three families as well, because it was a dark day for those folks over at the Air National Guard on July the 1st, 2012, when this tragedy happened. But I speak for my family. We are thankful. We're glad to live in Belmont, and we're here to support you in any way that we can. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again to the family members and to Councilman Hill for his efforts to recognize the service and sacrifice of Major Joe McCormick. All right, at this time, I would entertain a motion to set the agenda.
Motion to set the agenda.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is set. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. Do we need, it's fine the way it is, right? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is unanimously adopted. That brings us to the regular agenda, and item C1, public comment. Let's see if we have any public comment tonight. Thank you. All right, nobody has signed up for general public comment, item C1. So we will move on then to item C2, public hearing for the fiscal year 2025-2026 budget. Do we have a motion to go into public hearing?
Motion to go into public hearing.
Second, a motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are now in public hearing. Our city manager, Miles Braswell, will impart some information.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. In your council packet, you all received the fiscal year 25-26 City of Belmont's budget message. It also included the budget ordinance, the accrued staffing list, the budget line items, the CIP for the general fund and the water and sewer fund, and the fee schedule. This budget invests in the staff, provides a high level of operational service, and invests in the city's infrastructure. Just for a quick budget snapshot, the general fund is budgeted at $25,796,545. The water and sewer fund is budgeted at $10,424,042. Stormwater fund is budgeted at $1,096,642. And the budget recommends maintaining the current property tax rate at 0.455 cents per $100. The general fund highlights, of course, we're not recommending a property tax increase. Ad valorem revenues are estimated to increase 6% from the previous year. We included 8 new positions. Those are 3 fire captains and 5 firefighters. There's a 2% cost of living adjustment as well as up to a 3% merit. Sworn police officers will receive a $7,000 increase. The police ALO program is fully funded. And the budget percentage breakdown by department is as follows. It's 30% for the police, 18% for the fire department, 13% for streets, 7% for administration, 5% for recreation, 5% for the planning department, 2% for the community development, 8% for debt, 5% capital, and 7% other. Those are the general fund highlights. For the water and sewer enterprise fund highlights, the total budget, of course, is at $10,424,042, which is a 1% increase from previous fiscal year. There's a proposed 10.5% increase in water and 10.5% increase in sewer rates. There's a 2% cost of living adjustment, as well as up to a 3% merit. And no new positions were recommended in the water sewer fund. In the stormwater fund, it's supported by user fees and expected to increase by $327,000. There is a healthy stormwater fund balance, so we've used $228,642 of this fund increase as a transfer from the fund balance to complete more capital projects. In the CIP, for the highlights, in the general fund CIP, it's a 5-year total. The amount is $67.5 million, and for fiscal year 25-26, $1.18 million is budgeted. The total for there's a 10-year water and sewer CIP plan, and it's $160.4 million. And for fiscal year 25-26, just $165,813 is budgeted for water and sewer projects, even though we've carried over several large projects from this fiscal year. I do want to point out, and we could get to it at the next item, which is the budget ordinance. There is a revised budget ordinance that I've placed on your desk, so I'll get to those points. So, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, thank you for your leadership and guidance through this process, and Mayor Pro Tem, I'll turn it back over to you at this time.
Okay, any questions from the city manager about the budget? Okay. Did we ever determine why the fees for the out-of-city users were going down for the rec center?
We put them back where they were initially, so we didn't make that change.
Okay, great.
Thanks for
Thank
pointing that out.
Yes. There is no one signed up for public comment, so there being no questions, no public comment, I would entertain a motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
Second.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are out of public hearing. That brings us to item C3, adoption of the fiscal year 2025-2026 budget ordinance. And I believe the city manager is going to point out a few minor changes to the budget ordinance that we've all received a new copy on our desk.
Yes. The first page where it says fund balance appropriation at $488,310. The LGC has recommended to our finance director that we list this separately. It does not change the total anticipated revenue amount. It's just we needed to list that out, so the LGC wanted us to do that. That's one change in the budget ordinance. On section 7 and section 9, there were 3 small edits from Jim's comments that he provided to us. There was a comma, the addition of the word "the," and the change from the word "as" to "at." So we made those 3. Also in section 7, on the levy of taxes, that last sentence, the rate is based on a total valuation of property for the purposes of taxation of $3,320,542,081 and an estimated rate of collection of 98%. That was also a recommendation by the LGC to our finance director to add that statement in the levy of taxes. And so we did that.
Just to be clear, this isn't 3.3 billion, it's 3.3 million.
No.
Right?
No, it's 3.3 billion.
It's billion
No.
for property.
Okay, gotcha.
And so we've added that statement in there as well, and those were the final edits to the budget ordinance. So Mayor Pro Tem, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I misread that. I was looking at something else when I saw that on my phone.
Any questions on any of the changes that Miles just went over? All right, seeing none, if anyone wants to make a motion to approve the budget ordinance for fiscal year 2025-2026.
Before we do that, just quick comment. I mean, I know it seems like we're coming to this meeting tonight just for, we tend to do this every year, but just to recap, There have been multiple different budget workshops in which council and staff have worked through this, both kind of, adjustments here and there. Of course, I brought my adjustments to the budget, and I appreciate the council accepting those. And I do just want to reiterate to the public that this has been a long, drawn-out process, and I appreciate staff, Miles, Kevin, Jared, and all the department heads for everything that they've done, and of course, council working on this as well. So, Jim, I just wanted to have those comments.
Yes, thank you. Well said, and thank you. Yes, it's obviously a culmination, this is, of many months of work that started, all the way back in January?
Yes, sir.
And so, it's always a lot of work, and we appreciate everyone who contributed to this, and department heads, and administration, and everyone for getting us to where we're at. So is it a motion to adopt or a motion to approve?
I would say adopt.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2025-2026 budget ordinance.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you again to everyone who got us to this point. And we have a budget for next year, which is maybe more than the state can say sometimes. All right, very good. So moving along then to item C4, public hearing for SUP 2025-01. Applicant is seeking approval to install a Class 2 ground-mounted solar energy system, SES, to support the Sisters of Mercy campus. So we will start by having a motion to go into public hearing.
Motion to go into public hearing.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are in public hearing, and I will first recognize our city attorney, Parks Wilson, to sort of go over the process and constitute the panel.
Okay. So, for purpose, council's had several of these in the past, this council has, but for purposes of public and those viewing by other means, this is a little different process than what you'll normally see a city council vote. They normally sit as a legislative body, and they vote up or down on issues depending on how they feel about them without any identifiable reason necessarily. But here, this is called a quasi-judicial process, and there is a strict standard required for them to vote based solely on evidence that's going to be presented here tonight as a part of this agenda item. This is going to look a little bit like what you might see if you go to a courthouse sometime. They're going to be, you'll hear the word parties, witnesses, sworn testimony, cross-examination. There's rules of procedure are relaxed in this format. The council sits as both judge and jury, and they have to determine certain facts and make findings on those facts based solely again on the evidence presented before they can reach a decision. Applicant has the burden of proof, and it's by what's called a preponderance of the evidence. Just if you have an equal scale, it has to tip gradually one way in their favor to be able to carry their burden of proof. Opinion testimony is to be disregarded. It's based solely on facts, and we will identify the required findings in a little bit. The normal process is that the presenter will present direct narrative testimony. The other side would have an opportunity to cross-examine at my direction, and then after that, the council is free to ask questions of the witness. So let's, first of all, I need to poll the council to make sure that we have, this is a procedure where you leave your preconceived notions at the door. When you come in, this is to certify that there's no bias in this process. So having heard the description of what is being asked by the parties here, approval of to install a Class 2 ground-mounted solar energy system to support the Sisters of Mercy campus. I'll ask you first, do any of the council members have a financial or pecuniary or direct, substantial and readily identifiable financial impact on the outcome of this proceeding? If not, if you don't have, raise your hand. If you don't have. If you don't have any close family, business, or other associational relationship with the presenter, if you don't, raise your hand. And if there any other reason why you can't make a fair and impartial decision based solely on the evidence, if there's any reason you can't do that, raise your hand. Or if you can do that, raise your hand. Okay. All right, I determined that the panel is declared constituted properly. And then now we're going to proceed with, I need a minute to identify who's going to be the witnesses and who's presenting on behalf of the city. Okay. And who, the applicant? One.
Myself, and then we've got 4 other folks here.
Are they going to testify?
Possibly.
Okay, everybody come up, that's going to possibly testify.
And is one of these witnesses Shannon McGowan?
That's me, yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Yeah, all right, very good.
Okay, let's do, how many have we got? Let's do, bring 3 up here. For 3, put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, the others. Left hand on the Bible, raise your right. You can. We got room. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. Tiffany, you present.
Chester's
Chester,
presenting for
okay.
us one.
All right. So Chester, in this proceeding, I don't know if you've actually done one of these or not. We'll let you, rather than ask you questions and lead you through it, we'll let you just present in a narrative statement like you normally do. For it's on this matter. Okay? So,
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chester Jones. I'm a planner with the City of Belmont Planning and Zoning Department, and tonight I'll be presenting for the public hearing for SUP 2025.01, Pisgah Energy Solar Farm. A little bit of background about this application. In 2024, Pisgah Energy proposed a text amendment to facilitate and permit the use and installation of solar farms here in Belmont. Solar arrays, at the time, there was no legislative provisions for solar farms, and so that's what TA 2024.03 was designed to do. TA 2024.03 was unanimously approved with a modification requiring Class 2 and Class 3 SES systems to require the successful petition of a special use permit. A little bit of a timeline of just the events, how we got to this point. Back in March, TA 2024.03 was approved by City Council with modifications, once again, requiring Class 2 systems to permit for a SUP, a special use permit. Later that month, on the 26th, the applicant submitted SUP 2025.01 for consideration, and in June today, the SUP is presented before the City Council. So the proposed SES system is going to be located at parcel ID 209.209.104 for the Sisters of Mercy campus on the northwest portion of the northwest corner of the parcel, closer to the intersection of North Main and Wilkinson. On the left, where that arrow is delineated, it's kind of giving you a snippet of their site plan and what is designed for the applicant. That was also included in the attachments for this agenda item, as well as in your package provided by the applicant. Give an overview of the site conditions. There is already an existing Type A mature tree buffer along the perimeter of the site, specifically at that North Main and Wilkinson intersection that will be along the perimeter of the solar energy system, as well as there's a sloping topography to ensure that the visibility from the grade is less than 6 feet, as outlined in Chapter 6 of Belmont LDC, as well as just a little bit of information about the railroad that is right on the corner of North Main. That railroad is inactive and within the North Main Street right-of-way, and the solar energy system is set even farther back. So in addition to the already proposed setbacks, you have that railroad right there to also assist in visibility from the road, to assist in the obscuring of vision for the road. Picture on your screen, you see a cross-section from what the solar energy system will look like from the Wilkinson Boulevard view and the North Main Street view. This is just to exemplify that at no point in the slope of the proposed solar farm does this does the height exceed the height minimum, the height maximum set forth in Chapter 6 of Belmont LDC.
Just, can you go back to the previous comment?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry, is this?
No, let's let it be.
No, apologies.
When reviewing this application, staff had to conduct an analysis in comparison to how it stacks up with LDC, and these are the following chapters that would be relevant for this site plan. So in Chapter 2, which helps define the separate classes of SES systems, seeing as though the proposed system is 1.75 acres and supporting a commercial use, it would be classified as an accessory structure. But due to that definition in Chapter 2, it would then be a Class 2 system. In Chapter 3.10.4, as a commercial use, the ground-mounted solar energy system must satisfy additional requirements set forth in Chapter 4 and Chapter 6. In Chapter 4, accessory structures for that building type, this will be a institutional building type. Accessory structures over 500 square feet are required to have a 20-foot side and rear setback. The proposed site plan provided by the applicant features 20-foot side and rear setbacks. According to additional requirements laid out in Chapter 6.2.9, the proposed site plan complies with all of the height and location and scaling requirements as specified in that chapter, as well as the additional requirements to utilize the natural buffer. The applicant was also required to provide a decommissioning plan and an interconnection agreement during the time of permitting. The applicant is also required and committed to meeting NCDEQ standards at the construction document stage of their application. Tonight, the applicant is seeking approval for the special use permit, also as laid out in Chapter 6 of Belmont LDC. Key staff takeaways: Pisgah Energy's proposed solar energy system complies with all the LDC standards, except with the exception of the successful petition of a special use permit. And so tonight, staff requests that City Council review the application and determine whether Pisgah Energy, the applicant's evidence and sworn testimony satisfies the requirements laid out in 15.9 of Belmont LDC, which are the special use permit stipulations. The required findings of these stipulations, according to Chapter 15 of Belmont's LDC, would require that the use meets all required principles and specifications of the LDC and any adopted land use plans. The proposed plan, if developed according to the site plan submitted and approved, will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area, as well as the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety and will not substantially injure the value of adjoining properties if located where it is proposed.
Okay, I don't know who's representing, okay, you have any cross-examination for Chester? Okay, questions from council? Jason had one.
Could you go back to that slide? I think it was about halfway through your presentation. There you go. Shows the elevations. So the bottom one, you might understand that that is looking not from Main Street, I guess, what would that be, east? This is kind of looking at it sort of.
Directly on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're looking, in other words, if you're on Main Street, looking at this parcel, are we saying that that grade down is what, 6 feet, did you say?
I didn't that grade down.
But I guess I'm just never paying attention, yeah.
This dotted line here, this shows that 4.5 feet. The LDC of Chapter 6 specifies that solar energy systems cannot be taller than 6 feet.
Okay.
So then that's at grade or at site. And so with the slope they don't ever exceed more than 4.7.
But there is a pretty significant slope there, I guess I just haven't paid close attention to slopes away from the street. Right? Based on that dot at the bottom, dotted line there.
Think of Wilkinson and how once you kind of go down across the old railroad tracks and kind of go straight down,
Yeah.
that follows that path
Right.
going down to the.
It's not sloped that much. I feel like, yeah, we played T-ball out there in the field back in the day. Other, questions from council?
Would there be any, I may have missed this, would there be any buffer around the arrays at all? on the-
Yes, the chapter 6 of Belmont LDC requires a type A buffer. The applicant intends to use the existing mature tree line buffer as well, that is already there.
As well, or they're just using?
That's already there.
They're
My
just
apologies.
using that, okay.
Mhm.
I do have a quick question. Did you have anything else, Dave?
Well, the type A buffers, can you elaborate on what that is? I can't recall that.
8 feet, opaque,
8 feet?
opaque. I can verify that as well. We can verify that and circle back to you, but I believe, yeah, we'll verify that. Be sure to direct answer for that.
Okay. That's all.
Just real quick on the buffering. So obviously there's the existing trees there, and obviously, I know they're pretty tall, right? Pretty concealed. What's to say if like down the road, one of them die, one of them fall over it? They're responsible for replacing that buffer, correct? That's a buffer that's in perpetuity, not just in the time of construction, correct? Or how do we handle that?
Defer to mine.
It's never really come to mind except for this type of particular project, which we don't have today.
Those privacy trees is all about.
Sure, so any buffer that's voluntarily installed at the discretion of the property owner would not be something that we would necessarily require replacement of. But in the event of this project where the buffer is required, subject to a site plan approval and or special use permit, that would be required to be maintained in perpetuity for the continued use of the property as approved. So in this case, it would need to be replaced in order to constantly maintain for this proposed use, that it stays in place.
Replaced at the required height, not with an intended that it grows to the height, correct?
There is a minimum height, so I'm working on looking up those standards so that I can read to you verbatim what's in the land development code, but it would be required to be replaced at the minimum height at the time of planting with a minimum height for it to grow to. That being said,
We don't know that minimum height right now?
well, I have it
Oh.
on the computer. I would like to read it to you verbatim, so if you'll
Gotcha.
give me about 5 seconds, I can go pull it up for you and
Yeah.
bring it back here. I just want to make sure we're reading it accurately into the record for you this evening. But yes, there are some specific requirements there. That being said, the entire canopy that's in place today has been in place for a while and would be significantly larger than what our requirement would be.
Okay.
Are they gonna have to tear any of those down to get to the site, or are they gonna go in the actual entrance and then come over the curb, I guess?
Sure, I would let the applicant speak to how they intend to approach construction.
While she's looking that up, any other questions from the panel?
Just, this is something that kind of popped up when we initially discussed the text amendment regarding this. I mean, with the slope that's suggested here, again, is there any cause for concern in regards to water runoff or anything like that that would negatively attribute the area than what it is today? Or have we looked at that?
We have, in filing and successfully doing the text amendment, one of the requirements was applicants would have to comply with the NCDEQ manual. And this applicant has, at the time of permitting or construction plans, and this applicant has committed to meet those requirements. So at this point, at this time, there's no reason for me to believe that, or there's been no evidence that they would not comply with that. That's been part of the ongoing conversations and review of this, as well as ordained by the LDC.
So we're satisfied with it?
I'm very much so.
I remove my masks. Are you done?
Right now.
Okay. So if I understand correctly from the presentation, this application meets all requirements of the land development code, other than the land development code says they need a special use permit to be able to do it.
Yes, sir.
But other than that, all the requirements of the land development code are met.
Yes, sir.
I was a bit confused. Can you clarify what are the rear and side setbacks? Because you said 20/20, but elsewhere in the application, I swear, they said like 10/15 or something.
Yes, sir.
I just want to know what they are. I mean, apparently they meet them, correct?
Yes, sir, they
are.
do. They do. So if we take a gander at, one moment. So we take a gander at chapter 6 of Belmont's LDC. Blanketed initially, for ground mounted solar panels, we asked for a 15 minimum rear setback. The applicant has provided, to exceed that, because if we go to, we jump to chapter 4 of Belmont's LDC, it asks for accessory structures exceeding over 500 square feet to meet that 20-foot rear setback, to meet that requirement. So the lower hanging fruit would be that 15 feet, but because of what's provided in chapter 4, the applicant wanted to meet that bar as well.
And I believe I also read in the report that this application was presented to the TRC. And what does the TRC stand for?
That's our technical review committee that's comprised of all the emergency services and different departments of the city of Belmont to ensure public safety.
And were any public safety concerns identified?
No, sir.
And if there were any of the runoff concerns that have been asked about, would they have been raised at that time?
Very much so.
And I believe I also read that the applicant will be obtaining watershed permit and erosion and sediment control permits. Is that correct?
That's accurate.
All right. And there are no conditions associated with this approval?
Not proposed by staff.
Okay. That's all I have. I think Ms. Farrow wants to read the code provision.
Yes, so per the LDC, the type A buffer's function is verbatim to function as an opaque screen from the ground to a height of at least 8 feet, and is intended to exclude visual contact between the uses and create a strong impression of spatial separation. So specifically, in order to do that, one of the requirements says where a natural buffer exists, it is to remain undisturbed. If the existing conditions of the buffer do not meet the requirements of the type A landscaping, supplemental planting may be required in order to make sure that it is able to serve as a natural resource buffer. All buffers required shall be completely undisturbed if it's required by the watershed ordinance or stream buffer ordinance. So it has details to protect some of the things that you all were mentioning there before, but its minimum height does need to be 8 feet, and then additionally in 11.4, our land development code says that all evergreen trees, which is what the current buffer consists of, shall not be less than 8 foot in height with a minimum of a 2-inch caliper at the time of installation. So there is a minimum height at the time of planting as well as minimum standards for the type A buffer itself.
Maybe I missed it, but where's the language in regards to if something was to happen to this, they have to keep it up in perpetuity? Because I didn't
Sure.
see that.
So that is because if it's a required buffer, the buffer is required to remain in place because it is a buffer. So there are planting standards in chapter 11.4, they're in our maintenance standards, and it talks about the time if something is damaged, it goes over in detail about the process to replace that and the minimum plantings. Those minimum plantings are at the specified size that I just read into the record, but there's an entire section of the code that talks about maintenance standards for required buffers.
So we're covered again, just to cover that. Yeah.
That's correct. I mean, if you all do feel that there is a condition warranted in order to help you make the findings, as a reminder, it's staff's understanding that you're able to add that if it helps you to meet the intent of making the finding as requested. But it is staff's opinion that it is covered by the land development code.
And Tiffany, if memory serves, the existing buffers that are there, they're at least 8 feet. They're probably 12.
Yes, they exceed that. I would let the applicant speak to if they know the exact height, but they far exceed 8 feet.
Yeah, and then with the same mutual understanding trying to recall from memory along Wilkinson, that side of the property as well,
Yes.
whether they're comparable.
Yes.
And then if we could go back to the elevation drawing. There. Yeah. What's that out there? On the first array, row. You see that?
Thank you.
Yeah, what's that? What's
This
the
is
array?
8.9 from the ground to the top.
Yeah.
But the way that our LDC measures height is at the height from the street edge,
Should be over here, so
which
that's,
would be over here, which is the 4.5.
gotcha. So you're talking,
And so then in between there, you can see here some, what looks like cloud-shaped lines. They're noting existing vegetative buffer approximately 47 feet tall. So you're seeing where that sits approximately in relation to that right-of-way
yeah.
between the height at the street and the proposed.
Safe to say there's not gonna be much visibility of this with the existing buffers that are there.
Based on what we received from the applicant, that would be accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Robert?
Any further questions for staff?
Okay, at this time, you want to move that this piece of the staff report be submitted in evidence. Okay, so moved. All right, is that all you have?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions, you guys? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now with applicant, we'll proceed. If you will, give your name and address.
Sure.
For the record.
Hello, everybody. My name is Samantha Kegley. I am at 177 Holbrook Road in Candler, North Carolina, 28715. All right. First, I want to thank City Council for hearing our presentation this evening. I would also like to thank Chester and Tiffany for the great presentation that they gave teaming us up for this. I introduced myself. I also have a number of folks from my project team with me this evening. I've got Phelps Clark, who is the operations manager at Busy Energy. Jeff Polanco, who is a professional engineer and the civil engineer of record, is here to answer any questions if needed. Shannon McCowan, Institute Director of Real Estate and Facilities for the Sisters of Mercy organization, is here, as well as Ty Sutton, who is a state certified general appraiser, will give some testimony at the end. So, we are Pisgah Energy. We have applied for a special use permit, SUP 2025.01, for the Pisgah Energy Solar Farm, also known as the SMA Belmont Renewable Energy System. Just a quick note, I know that some notices went out to adjoining property owners. I think with Holy Angels listed on there, I just want to make a slight correction that the Holy Angels is very active ministry on SMA's campus, although the Sisters of Mercy do own that property and the Holy Angels are a tenant. And then a quick introduction to the Sisters of Mercy. The Sisters of Mercy of the Americas is a faith-based organization working for a more just and inclusive world for all people. Rooted in the Catholic faith, they value spirituality, community, service, social justice, and works of mercy. They envision an improved world for people who are economically poor, sick, and uneducated. And they commit their lives to God and their resources to serve, advocate, and pray for those in need around the world. With over 1,700 sisters in the Americas, they strive to make a difference in the lives of those in need in North, South, and Central America, the Caribbean, Guam, and the Philippines. A highly dedicated staff of over 700 employees support the work and lives of the sisters, and the Sisters of Mercy as an organization seeks to carry out the mission of mercy, guided by prayerful consideration of the needs of our time, rooted in 4 core values inspired by the life of their founder, Catherine McCauley, and those values are spirituality, community, service, and social justice. Daily activities at the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas are focused on 5 interconnected critical concerns, one of which is Earth. SMA seeks to implement sustainability practices and mitigate negative climate impact where possible. A major aspirational goal towards realizing this objective is to become carbon neutral prior to the year 2040. Installation of the proposed 691.2 kilowatt DC ground-mounted solar array in SUP 2025.01 is a major step towards realizing this goal goal and will offset 72.6% of the annual energy consumption of the central energy plant on the SMA Belmont campus. Installation of the proposed solar energy system will assist with SMA's 2 additional goals of reducing grid electricity purchases and supporting local solar businesses, jobs, and workforce development whenever possible. Installation of the proposed solar energy system on SMA Belmont's campus supports the following goals from Belmont's comprehensive land use plan adopted in 2018. Goal number 1 is land use, and that is to ensure a balanced approach to land use to encourage a healthy tax base and a mix of uses that will promote choice in housing, shopping, mobility, services, and recreation. Solar energy systems are classified as essential services according to the recently codified text amendment passed on March 3rd, 2025. And goal number 7 for Belmont is to protect the natural environment of Belmont as a critical public asset. Solar energy systems, provide residents a way to directly support this goal by producing renewable energy and reducing harmful emissions. Additionally, installation of the proposed solar energy system on SMA's Belmont campus supports the public interest of Belmont, as evidenced by the existence of the citizen-run Environmental Sustainability Board and programs like Belmont Composts. To kind of call back a little bit to our original text amendment that was passed to allow for ground-mounted solar within the city of Belmont, we could ask the question, why not rooftop or canopy solar on SMA's campus? Those are 2 uses that were already regulated under the LDC. And to that point, SMA's available roof space for solar installation is extremely limited. The available roof space would only be able to fit an estimated 275 kilowatts DC of solar compared to the 691.2 kilowatts DC planned for the ground mount installation. So with the ground mount installation, you get about 2.5 times more solar than you would on the rooftop. Additionally, canopy and carport solar installations can be quite expensive. We would typically see a rooftop installation come in at about $1.78 per watt DC. Ground mount installations more in the range of $2.50 per watt DC. And then canopy and carport solar can come in as high as $7.48 per watt DC. There were some additional concerns about canopy and carport solar on the campus. One being parking availability is quite limited between SMA, the Holy Angels, and the Belmont Abbey College. So blocking off parking areas during construction of canopy solar is not feasible for the organization. Additionally, students would be parking underneath the canopy, and the possibility for cars bumping and crashing into the foundation is a concern. Safety cameras on campus would also be blocked by the overhanging canopies. That was a large concern for the organization. So ground-mounted solar is also contained by a fence as opposed to being out in the open. So the ground-mounted solar strikes the perfect balance between cost, energy output, space constraints, and safety and security. As noted by the Belmont Planning Department staff, in 2024, PISGA Energy proposed a text amendment to permit the installation of ground-mounted solar energy systems in Belmont city limits. Text Amendment 2024.03 was unanimously approved on March 3rd, 2025, with a modification that requires Class 2 and Class 3 solar energy systems to obtain a special use permit. SMA's proposed SES is a Class 2 system, so here we are. Special use permit SUP 2025.01 presentation is today, June 2nd, 2025, at the City Council meeting for approval. And of note, we do also have SPR 2025.05, which is our site plan application, which is now active and under review with the Planning Department. All right, so in accordance with the Land Development Code, Chapter 15, applicants for special use permits are required to present facts and exhibits in support of 3 findings of fact. First finding of fact will be the use meets all required principles and specifications of the code and any adopted land use plans. I'm getting a little repetitive here, but as noted by the Planning Department staff, the proposed SES meets all land development code regulations, and there are no additional adopted land use plans for this property. Per Chapter 2 of the LDC, the proposed solar energy system is 1.75 acres, therefore classified as Class 2, Per chapter 3.10.4 of the LDC, as a commercial use, we have to comply with chapters 4 and 6 of the LDC. Then per chapter 4 of the LDC, accessory structures over 500 square feet in zone BCD and ICD are required to have a 20-foot rear and side setback, and our proposed solar energy system does comply with this requirement. Per chapter 6.2.9 of the Land Development Code, the site plan complies with all height and setback requirements. The existing natural buffer will be kept to comply with the type A buffer requirement. And additionally, a decommissioning plan and interconnection agreement will be submitted during the permitting process. So this brings us to Exhibit 1. You all should have packets, oh, I'm so sorry. You should have packets in front of you with all of our exhibits. This is on the 11 by 17 print, prepared by Jeff Polanco, civil engineer of record, who is here to answer questions if needed, and entering into record, as noted by the planning staff. This Class 2 solar energy system is 1.75 acres with a 20-foot side and 20-foot rear setback. We have 20 and 30-foot type A mature tree buffers on the north and west sides of the array. These are existing and will stay. Visibility from grade, the height of the system at grade, or from view at grade, is less than 6 feet as required. Additionally, we do have stated on the site plan, the solar energy system is designed based on section E6 of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality Stormwater Design Manual to maintain pervious classification. And the proposed site plan is under review with the planning department, and we commit to following all provisions of the LDC. Exhibit 2 is our decommissioning plan. As prepared below, will be submitted as part of permitting, which is required by LDC Chapter 6.2.9. And Exhibit 3 is our interconnection agreement. And the interconnection agreement, as pictured below, will be submitted as part of permitting, which is required by LDC Chapter 6.2.9. The interconnection agreement with Duke Energy Carolinas was signed by both Duke Energy and the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas on March 25th, 2025, and all required fees have been paid to Duke Energy. So from Duke's perspective, we can get started with construction whenever. Moving on to finding of fact number 2. The proposed use, if developed according to the plan submitted and approved, will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. So the proposed solar energy system is visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. It is screened from view on both the north and west sides, where it borders Main Street and Wilkinson Boulevard by the existing type A buffer of mature arborvitae trees. The solar energy system will be located in the rear of the existing administrative building on the SMA campus, so not immediately visible from the south or the east sides of the array either. It's not visible from any adjoining properties, and as allowed by LDC Chapter 5.11, Chapter 5.12, and Chapter 6.2.9, the proposed solar energy system will be an accessory structure to the primary administrative building on campus. Additionally, the fence surrounding the array will be chain linked in accordance with Chapter 4.8 of the LDC, and the solar energy system will be integrated with the campus electrical system. So I'm going to move on to Exhibit 4, which is a series of photos of the existing conditions. Each photo, I'm going to start with one of these, which just kind of notes with the gold star where the proposed solar field is, and then the red arrows will show where the photos were taken and in the direction that the photos are facing. So this first photo will be taken from North Main Street on the west side of the array facing east. And as you can see, the mature trees do screen the entire view of the proposed solar field. Next, we have a photo from Wilkinson Boulevard on the north side of the array, excuse me, facing south. Similarly, you can see the mature arborvitae trees do screen the view of the field. This next photo is taken from the south, taken right in front of the administrative building on campus facing north. And from here you can see that the administrative building does screen the view of the field. parcel of the Sisters of Mercy, and you can see again notated by the gold star, the proposed solar field, and then all of the adjoining properties kind of to the east, south, and east and south sides of the array. From any of those properties, you're not going to be able to see the solar energy system. There's about 14 acres of forest and a number of large campus buildings in between those properties and the proposed solar field. And that brings me to finding of fact number 3, which is the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety and will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property if located where proposed. The solar energy system will comply with all safety regulations, including the National Electric Code and all applicable local codes and standards. We're going to be obtaining the following permits prior to commencing construction: a special use permit and zoning permit from Belmont, an additional watershed permit from Belmont. We will be getting erosion and sedimentation control permits from Gaston County, the NCGO1 permit, which is part of a federal register, and additionally building and electrical permits from Gaston County. So the solar energy system is not going to emit any noise or air pollution and will not be visible from adjoining properties. And then a decommissioning plan will be submitted as part of the permitting process, reducing the risk that the system falls into disrepair. And I'm going to go back to exhibit number 3, again, which is our decommissioning plan. This, again, ensures that the system does not fall into disrepair, possibly posing a health or safety risk to any Belmont residents. This is kind of an agreement that the Sisters of Mercy makes to deconstruct the solar system at the end of its useful life, or if it is damaged and will not be repaired, and then they will return the site to pre-solar conditions. And finally, we have Exhibit 5, which is an appraisal report compiled by Richard Kirkland of Kirkland Appraisals LLC and Ty Sutton of Sutton Shively Appraisals LLC. Expert testimony is presented by Ty Sutton, who is a state certified general appraiser, and this report is presented in support of finding of fact number 2 and finding of fact number 3. So at this time, I would like to invite Ty Sutton. Yes.
One quick second. Can you go back one slide?
Can I ask you questions before you call?
Okay, sure.
You might need to adjust that. I believe this should be Exhibit 2, not Exhibit 3, for the decommissioning plan. At least that's what it is on my sheet.
It is. You're correct. My apologies.
So just for the
Exhibit 2.
record.
Council have questions for this witness.
I do.
Okay.
Can we talk about this fence? So kind of on the safety aspect of
Sure.
it. So what type of fence is going to be installed? It seems a little generic with chain link, but I'm not too familiar with solar panels or anything like that, but generally speaking, when you look at these types of high energy areas, they're well fenced to make sure people can't just wander in there
Exactly.
or something. So maybe talk a little bit about that. Because this is a very highly, trafficked area, even though it's on private property. There's a lot of folks that walk and, you wouldn't want someone to wander into that.
Definitely. So the National Electric Code has provisions for various installations, and based on the voltage that will be installed on the Sisters of Mercy campus, we're required to have a 7-foot tall fence, or 6 feet with 3 wires of barbed wire, although the Sisters of Mercy has opted for a 7-foot tall chain link fence.
Are there gonna be any signs put out?
Yes, there will also be signs. There's a number of signs and labels that are required by the National Electric Code.
Additional questions?
Yes. Any questions? Any other questions?
Could there be places for parking for operations and maintenance of the panels?
So we do have, you'll notice on the site plan, kind of inside the fence area, there is a T drive within the fence area. That'll be a gravel drive available for parking for operations and maintenance.
Where,
It's inside, it's on the site plan, and that driveway, that gravel
Oh.
drive is inside of the fence area.
thank you.
Next to the fence, or excuse me, the fence, the gate, is that where you're talking about?
Yep.
All right, if there are no further questions, you have another park system.
You have another witness you want to come
I do,
forward?
yes, sir.
Okay, sure. Now's the time.
Suite 202, Greensboro 27410. I'm Ty Sutton, I'm a principal with Sutton Shively Appraisals out of Greensboro. I've been appraising for 31 years. I hold the MAI, which is a commercial designation, the SRA, which is the residential designation, and the AIGRS, which is the review designation of the Appraisal Institute. These are the highest commercial and residential designation put out by the Institute. The designations require significant additional peer review, education requirements, and national testing. I am governed by the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, USPAP, which requires me to be objective, impartial, and independent. I have reviewed the report on the property at 101 Mercy Drive in Belmont in Gaston County, which was prepared by Richard Kirkland, MAI, with Kirkland Appraisals, LLC. The report utilizes 4 methodologies. This includes matched pair analysis, also referred to as paired sales. This includes, there are 45 examples of the matched paired in the report. The sale resale is the second one. It has 3 examples. We have 8 university studies and an assessor survey all over the nation with 189 responses, of which 189 responses, of which 172 stated no impact on value. The remaining assessors did not comment. Based on the data and analysis presented in the report, it is my professional opinion that the solar farm proposed at the subject property will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area, and that the use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property if located where proposed. That's my speech.
Council have any questions for this witness?
Just, so you have, we have this appraisal.
Yes, sir.
You've reviewed the appraisal and you've come to your own expert opinions.
Yes, I've signed off on it as well,
Okay.
and so now I've adopted it as my own.
Oh, okay, yes, I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Y'all have any other witnesses? I think, Chester, would you come back up just a minute, please? Because I've heard at least one additional question that staff, we'll ask staff. Councilman Rumfeld.
Yeah, I was just wondering, since this would be our first such solar array farm, right, in town, as part of your TRC protocol, were there any special considerations for fire or police in terms of public safety concerns that this might present at all?
No, sir, this is actually brought to them twice. We just wanted to be very sure. No comments were raised.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we have any?
Well, we had one individual sign up, I think, intending to, for this one, Shannon McCowan. I'm assuming you don't, since you haven't been called.
I just wanted to put my name on there and
Okay.
to call me later.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then that's all the witnesses that we have. Would it be appropriate for a motion to come out of public hearing?
Yes.
Motion to come out of public hearing?
Second.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are out of public hearing. That brings us to C5, consider approval of SUP 2025-01 Pisgah Energy Solar Farm.
We'll take these required findings of fact one at a time. And remember, council, your decision is based on, not on anything other than the testimony you just heard during this process.
Hey, Mark,
Yes.
one quick question. If we have a condition that we want to add, would it be prior to you asking for if council finds a unanimous finding, or is it? So basically, if I had a condition I wanted to add, I would then not vote for.
No, you go ahead and make the findings.
Yeah.
And then before you granted the SUP,
Okay,
you'd ask for any condition you want to impose.
Perfect.
If they agree to it.
thank you.
So the first finding is the use meets all required principles and specifications of the code and any adopted land use plans. All those in favor of that finding, raise your hand. 2, the proposed use, if developed according to the plan submitted and approved, will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. All in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. 3, the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety and will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property if located where proposed. All in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. Having made the 3 required findings, now, Councilman, if you want to make a motion to grant the SUP with a condition, then we'd have to make sure that the applicant agreed to your condition.
Perfect. I'd like to make a motion to approve with the condition of, and as far, maybe I'll leave it to planning and zoning in regards to how we should phrase this, but the intent is that the trees are maintained in perpetuity as long as the use is in its existing purpose for what we're approving it to. Based off of the minimum thresholds, it just was a little bit unclear to me that it's required for them to keep those buffers maintained. Let's say if a tree was to fall or die or have to be removed, I would say that is, as long as the site is being maintained in its current, the capacity we're about to approve, it must be replaced. And as far as a timeline, I defer to staff, but I do believe there should be a
So
timeline.
within a reasonable time,
Within a reasonable time.
at the applicant's expense.
At the applicant's expense. Thank you, Parker.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Before we vote, does the applicant agree to that condition?
Just a point of clarity, so, some of those trees are, actually 3 and 4 deep. Are you saying they'll light every tree for a tree? Or are you saying where a gap would be presented by a deadfall or a?
I would say tree for tree, because as it was presented to us with the existing buffer, as it is today, I agree that it provides adequate buffering to keep the integrity of its surrounding areas. If one of those trees were to fall, I cannot then say that the integrity is still there for the buffering. So I would say like for like. Tree for tree.
Okay, we'll stipulate that.
You'll stipulate that for the record. It's been stipulated by the applicant's representative that was sworn prior to testimony. Having the motion's been made and seconded, all in favor of granting the SUP as conditioned, raise your hand. All right, that's unanimous.
I will say that I don't believe the additional condition is necessary, but the applicant has agreed to it, so.
Okay. Well, I believe that concludes this.
Yes, thank you. All right, that was so much fun. Let's do it again. So that brings us to C6, public hearing for SUP 2024-01, 100 Vine Street. Applicant requesting to exceed the 35-foot maximum height of freestanding telecommunication towers within general residential zoning. So is there a motion to go into public hearing?
Motion to go into public hearing.
All right, motion made by Jason, seconded by Catherine. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are in public hearing.
I'm not going to go through the same. We can refer to that in the record if you want to, but I do need to poll the council again on your to show no bias in this matter because it's a separate matter. So again, number one, if you have no financial or pecuniary interest in the outcome of this proceeding, raise your hand. Unanimous. If you don't have any close familial, family, business, or other associated relationships with the applicant, raise your hand. If you have no other reason why you can't make a impartial ruling based solely on the evidence you're going to hear tonight, raise your hand. All right. That concludes the panel being declared properly constituted. Now, how many witnesses are on this? How many? 4 total.
For staff, 2, for applicant 3.
So that's 5.
Wait a minute. 2 and 3? Okay. Well, let's everybody come up here. truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Okay. Read. Left hand on the Bible, raise your right. You swear or affirm the truth, that testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank y'all. Okay, who's presenting for staff? Okay, you proceed.
Thank you. This is public hearing for SUP 2024.01, which is at 100 Vine Street for Duke Energy, where they are requesting for installation of a monopole. So, as stated previously, I will not go over this slide again, but just as a reminder, this is a quasi-judicial decision, and so as such, should follow the rules as previously explained earlier in our meeting by Parks, and be based on evidence alone, with the burden of proof resting on the applicant and landowner. Again, this is SUP 2024.01. The applicant this evening is Ryan Woods with Tower Engineering Professionals. The property owner is Duke Energy Corporation, and they are being represented this evening by Remington Jackson. The subject special use permit is located on parcel 127000. The parcel is 3.48 acres in size with the address of 100 Vine Street, and the current Belmont zoning is general residential. The image on the left shows the existing conditions of the subject site. As you can see, it is the location of an existing essential services facility, and the image on the right shows a map of that parcel as well, located at the intersection of Parktail Drive and Vine Street. So a bit of background. Planning staff has reviewed the plans as provided by the applicant for the proposed monopole structure, and in doing so, ultimately determined that two steps were going to need to be required for this project as proposed to move forward. One, first, would be to get a successful issuance of a variance in order to allow for the proposed relief from the applicant for additional buffering and landscaping that's required from the Land Development Code. The applicant's position was that there was a hardship due to the constraints on the site. And so then the other step that we noted was going to be required for this potential project was a special use permit in order to allow for the pole height to exceed the height as currently limited in the Land Development Code of up to 35 feet, unless a special use permit is approved within the general residential zoning designation. So, in doing so, we outlined that process and communicated with the applicant, and ultimately they submitted both applications for staff's review. The variance was recently presented at the April 10th Board of Adjustment meeting and unanimously approved by a vote of 4-0, with the Board of Adjustment finding no additional comments or conditions necessary in order to allow or approve the relief requested for the landscape buffer and additional landscaping as would typically be required on the site for Chapter 6.2.9 of the Belmont Land Development Code. So that being said, that relief was granted through the variance. The special use permit this evening is now for step 2 to specifically look at and analyze the requested pole height in order to determine whether or not the findings can be made to support the height as requested of 120 feet versus the 35 limited within general residential, otherwise without a special use permit. So a little bit more about those project details. Well, a lot of this we just went over, but just wanted to really highlight on this slide the aerial that you can see on the screen. So you can see the existing tree canopy as well as some of the space that's not being utilized by the essential services facility that's on there right now. And then that red arrow shows where the proposed location of this 120-foot monopole is proposed to be situated on the subject site plan. So we will go over that in more detail later, but it is probably at the furthest point away from the intersection of Vine and Parkdale as possible. So just to kind of give you some background on where we are, I told you we've been working on this one for a little bit with the applicant to determine the correct path forward. We have begun review and begin working with the project applicant since April of 2024. Sketch plans were submitted and routed to our technical review committee and its members and presented at an in-person meeting in May of 2024 to talk about any concerns that any departments had at that time. We did note for other departments that the project as proposed would need to go through the two steps, both for the variance and the special use permit, and asked them specifically to note if there were any concerns making any of the findings for either one of these cases. And at that time, no comments were given from any department, which, for the record, did include public safety, public works, engineering, and planning staff. No comments were given or concerns given during the meeting related to this proposed project. Following that meeting, the sketch plan was reviewed and wrapped up by the planning staff and noted that it complies with all requirements of the Land Development Code with the exception of needing the approval of a special use permit, which is why we're here this evening. Just a bit of background on where the site is situated. Again, we talked about it being at the location of Vine and Parkdale intersection. And just for some context about the surrounding properties directly adjacent to the subject site, starting at Flowers Court. Flowers Court is home to some multifamily development there, some existing housing inventory along that site, currently zoned INFR. Directly south of that is a recently approved 7-lot subdivision. It is also in the general residential zoning designation, but will be the future home to 7 individual single-family detached dwellings. There are some existing homes located off of Sandra Court, directly across the street off of Parkdale, and those are single-family detached and do include some duplex units as well, directly across the street. And then there's a site to the northwest there that's vacant currently, but could possibly be seen for future redevelopment. So it is surrounded by some primarily residential uses, although mixed in density. And this slide I have in case anybody wants some specific reference on topography, heights, or things of that nature. But as you can see, the gold star, as noted on this image, represents the proposed location by the applicant for the 120-foot monopole. Important things to note here, that proposed location sits about 676 feet above sea level. That puts it at approximately the highest point of the site. So just for some context, the Flowers Court properties sit about 9 feet lower than that at 666 feet above sea level. So they're going to be a little bit lower than the base of the proposed pole as currently situated. Those homes off of Sandra Court are currently proposed about at the same elevation. So they sit about 678 feet versus 676 feet. So they're about at the same grade as the proposed pole. But you can see there is some topographic variability surrounding the site there. Just wanted to put a bit of that in context for you all as you consider where the 120-foot pole may begin and where it's situated on the ground itself. There are some existing constraints on the site as well for existing utility easements. As you may imagine, this is an existing and active substation. So there are power line easements that run in and out of the property, both on the northwest and at the east. And these power lines are shown and circled in red on the image on your screen. You can see where those sit in relation to the proposed location of the monopole, which is indicated again on the screen by the red star. And just for a bit of context in terms of size and scale, what you see here is a 120-foot radius circle that is centralized upon the proposed location of the monopole. So in the event that the monopole ever, in worst case scenario, were laying down, that would be 120 feet from the base of the pole and what would be around it at that nexus. The applicant, as part of the proposed conditions before you this evening, has expressed that they are willing to and interested in utilizing a non-stealth design in order to help make requirement or fact finding number 2 for the ability to fit into the aesthetic character of the surrounding and adjacent properties. So just for a bit of context as to what a stealth design looks like versus a non-stealth design, A stealth design is currently required by the Land Development Code, but as a reminder, that's primarily written with the understanding that poles would be at 35 foot in height or less. So the current desire for a stealth design would, one example of those that is most commonly used would be the faux tree treatment here. The applicant is not requesting a pole that's 35 foot in height, but rather 120 foot in height. And so if it is helpful for City Council to make the finding that it is more in line with the character of the community to have something that is not mimicking the look and appearance of a tree because of its height, they are willing to forego that and utilize a more conventional or non-stealth design in this application. So that is part of the proposed conditions, but we wanted to include an example of both options for your visual reference and understanding as you deliberate this evening. So in consistency with the city's vision and regulations, staff is noting that our current regulations allow for use of a monopole or essential services type structure as long as there's a special use permit granted. So that is why they're seeking one this evening. And that includes in its location within general residential zoning. The staff also will continue the plan review process with the applicant, if approved, to ensure that it continues to comply throughout the construction plan process and permit issuance process with all requirements of the Land Development Code, any variance that was previously issued, as well as the special use permit conditions as you see appropriate this evening. And with that, that concludes staff's report and information here. We are asking that council consider all of the facts presented to you this evening, both from staff, the applicant, any others that have any public comment, and ultimately offer some findings or consideration of findings. One, that the use meets all required principles and specifications of the code and any adopted land use plans. Two, that the proposed plan, if developed in accordance as submitted, would be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. And three, that the use will not materially endanger the public health and safety and not substantially injure the value of adjoining property if located where proposed. So with that, that is staff's presentation for you this evening, and I stand by for any questions you may have.
Any questions for?
Well, doesn't the applicant get to cross-examine her first?
Oh, yes. No problem.
All right.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any questions?
So it was a little unclear to me, just to clarify. They're going to do the traditional,
Monopole.
and not the fake tree thing?
They would be required by the Land Development Code to do the one that looks kind of like a tree.
Okay.
Although, as council, you're able to make any conditions that you think would help to justify any findings that you make. And staff has previously checked in with the applicant, and they are more than willing to utilize the non-stealth design or the more uniform monopole design if council so chooses in helping to make that finding.
That would be the tallest tree.
I was about to say,
I feel like a
it
redwood.
might actually be going to Phoenix compliment the 120-foot tree. Okay, thank you. I just
You're
wanted
welcome.
clarification.
Any other
That's
questions for Tiffany?
Just to clarify, you mentioned the variance that they received from the Board of Adjustment regarding the buffering and screening requirements.
That's right.
So that's taken care of. That's been addressed by the Board of Adjustment. We don't need to deal with that here. Is that correct?
That's correct. It is noted in our staff report in order to make sure that you understand that that's what allowed staff to make the statement that we believe that now that the variance has been granted, the plans as proposed are able to comply with all other standards of the Land Development Code.
You want to move that the staff report be submitted for evidence?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you. Tiffany, who's going to present for that? Yes, sir. You state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Remington Jackson, commercial real estate attorney at Parker Poe Adams and Bernstein. Our address is 620 South Tryon Street, Suite 800, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28202. First, I want to say thank you to Ms. Farrow planning department as a whole. As you've already heard, have been working on this for several months before submitting as well as during the submission process. So thank you very much. This is our presentation. I want to admit this into evidence as well as the remaining exhibits from your agenda packet. I also have physical copies of this presentation for you. Okay. I do have them. Just a question for clarification. I planned on submitting and then as points 2 and 3 come up, admitting my experts on those topics. Is that all right? Which one do you look like? Thank you. Go with the clerk. Sorry.
So I think there was a procedural question, Parks?
I answered it.
Oh, what was the answer?
He wanted to make sure he could go ahead and submit the record prior to having his experts testify on 2 and 3. Okay.
Some of these things will be in 3 minutes, but I still need to present them for the record. As to the location of the property, 100 Vine Street, Belmont, North Carolina, 28012. Parcel ID number is 127000. That is what the monopole would technically look like out the stealthing, as we'll get to later. But as was already stated by planning staff, it will be 120 feet is the plan. This Duke Energy requests approval for a special use permit to a planned telecommunications pole to be added to already existing substation located in the general residential zone district. This is information about Duke Energy. As I'm sure most of you are familiar with Duke Energy as the main supplier in this area as well as most of the state. The monopole helps for resiliency, connectivity, and safety for its workers. This is, again, a repeat of the location of the existing substation, and as was already noted, where this telecommunications tower will go is towards the back right. This is another picture of the same area, just highlighted for you. This is what the site currently looks like as a substation. Also bringing into your view where the poles, the power lines are currently located. Moving on to the actual requirements for the special use permit standards based upon Belmont's land development code. The use meets all required principles and specifications of the code being adopted land use plans. We are basing this upon all of the exhibits that have already been submitted, as well as the planning department's presentation prior, that we, according to the Belmont Planning Department, Duke Energy has met all of the required principles and specifications of the land development code. Next, the proposed use, if developed according to the plan submitted and approved, will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. The poles proposed to be installed on property with an existing electronics substation and would aid in substation's functionality by improving its connectivity to the overall Duke network. The monopole design reduces the likelihood of materials falling into the substation area. At this point, I would like to bring my senior telecom analyst for Duke Energy to ask him a few questions regarding why we are asking for this non-stealth plan. Oh, there you are. Mr. Pierce, could you introduce yourself?
Robert Lanchevin, Senior IT Telecom Analyst with Duke Energy. My office is located at 9700 David Taylor Drive in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Robert, could you explain why the 120 feet request is made by Duke Energy?
120 feet is going to give us bare minimum clearance above the tree line to gain access for our communications network.
And why is the stealth issue for the 120 foot pole?
The primary reason we would prefer not to use a stealth pole is to ensure that there are minimal items falling into the telecom structures below. Excuse me, the electrical structures located below.
And what would this telecommunications pole actually do for Duke Energy?
Duke Energy strives in maintaining our network, and this is assisting us in upgrading the grid, and it would provide additional bandwidth needs as the grid continues to grow.
Don't have any further questions, but I can ask if, or would you like me to keep going and then at the end?
Well, I
Now,
think,
let's see if anyone has any cross-examination questions for this witness. Yes.
So would the use for this pole exclusively be for electrical transmission, or is there also the ability to, say, lease some of that space to some of our wireless communications companies, for instance?
At this time, that is not an option, sir. Inside the substation, we would not be leasing space to anyone else on the monopole. The security that is required to maintain that basically ties our hands in that department.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
and I believe you talked about not wanting to do stealth because of falling objects into the electrical equipment. Obviously, you're not intending that any thing were to fall like that, but it could happen. Is that what you're saying?
That is a correct statement, sir. We want to limit any additional equipment that is not truly required on the pole itself.
How often do you have mishaps like that where they fall off, like one of the fake branches fall off?
I'm not familiar with the stealth poles themselves, sir, but so I cannot truly answer that question.
Besides the fact it wouldn't be so stealth anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
At that height.
Just a point of clarity, I guess, for going forward, when we have SCPs, we should probably get an extra mic. So that we don't have attorney and witness sharing a microphone. It's kind of awkward, but there are no.
Other questions for this witness? Okay.
Just, one more, and I know you just answered it, but it didn't quite register with you. What exactly is this pole gonna do for you guys?
It's going to provide on-net communications for Duke Energy to the substation. And as we continue to expand the grid, we will need additional bandwidth to support it from a telecommunications perspective.
Okay.
Can I answer in layman's terms, if there's energy in one substation, they need to know where that is and if they need to send it to another location?
And having this will, I believe the report said it will assist you all should there be outages in helping to identify the problem and fixing the outages sooner.
That's correct.
We're all for that.
Yes.
All for that.
Yes.
Okay, that witness can step down.
Better plan than Kimberly D. Bowles.
We can call another witness now. We got some more presentation.
No, I'll be calling my next witness.
Okay.
Just to read the prompt, the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety and will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property if located or proposed. At this point, I'm going to call Mike Elwell, who is a certified general real estate appraiser for Cushman and Wakefield.
State your name and address.
Okay, my name is Mike Elwell. My address is 404 Topwater Lane, Greensboro, North Carolina, 27455.
Mike, could you tell us your specifications?
Yes, I'm a certified general real estate appraiser here in North Carolina. I hold the MAI, SRA designations with the Appraisal Institute. Been appraising for over 22 years. I also hold a designation in with the International Right-of-Way Association, the RWAC, which is focused on appraisal and appraisal review. I have been doing mostly the types of appraisal I do is for condemnation and eminent domain issues and special studies on the impact of facilities like what we're talking about tonight.
Could you tell us how you got involved with this project?
Yes, I was contacted to do a study on the tower that was proposed for this site, and to do an analysis of the impact of these types of towers throughout, in various places where we can find these types of towers.
And that report is listed as venture pricing impact study and exhibits. It's the 8th one.
So page 193 in our packet.
Could you, Mike, read for us your findings from your impact study?
What's that? And just give me a second. Okay, so we have, based on a review of the peer-reviewed literature and related topics and the study of several sale properties proximate to communications towers in Gaston County and other counties in North Carolina. The communications towers do not appear to have an influence on the sale prices of nearby properties. A discussion comparing the findings with proposed communication towers as the 100 Vine Street is included in this report.
From there, once it notes any questions from the council.
Questions for this witness?
Maybe it's someone else to talk to on this one. I don't have any questions as it particularly relates to kind of the property values, but Tiffany kind of flashed it up there, but in regards to the safety component of it, if this thing was to fall, did we clarify that the radius is clear for if that was to happen, if any kind of unforeseen circumstances that wouldn't necessarily fall or endanger someone?
Might be a Robert question, but
Call. Let me ask you before any questions for this witness? You step down.
I'll call that up, Robert. To my knowledge, this tower collapses in on itself rather than falling over. Let me confirm that. Robert, can you speak on how this tower deals with a catastrophic fall emergency of some sort?
My understanding in regards to the structural analysis that was completed on the tower, we have to meet the same codes that all public safety towers have to meet today. That includes category 3. The substation itself meets the same code, category 3. And the pole, from my understanding, actually should buckle in the middle, and the top portion should fold over on itself, basically.
Gotcha.
There's no safety buffer for that?
When you say safe,
So just south of where you guys are proposing, there's residential development that's planned. So I don't know if it would back right up to it.
I think you're referring to the Norfolk property.
No.
South of the property.
The wooded area, just.
Behind.
Yeah. It seems like that has plans to be developed. Is that gonna influence how that's developed?
To my knowledge, no. I think that based on the code, whatever the requirement is, has been met by Duke. I don't know if there's additional requirements based on that wooden area behind.
Here's that one slide that had the circle of the radius, that showed it would have fallen on the side in full without buckling.
I believe that was in Tiffany's
Yeah.
display.
I don't think it would infringe on that adjacent property, because it fell without buckling. At least, that's the way it looks.
Yeah, it looks like
Fire Court Apartments are closest, so I don't know how far away that is.
Any other questions for this witness?
I had just one question, whether whichever one of you might be the most appropriate one to speak to it. You also submitted a Federal Aviation Administration determination of no hazard to air navigation, that basically saying it doesn't need a light based on its height. That determination expired on May 6, 2025. I'm assuming nothing has happened in the interim that would change any of those conclusions from the FAA.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
What is the height requirement for a light for the FAA? I mean, that's a random question, but.
I can answer that. 199 feet, and that also depends on how close it is to a proximity to an airport.
Thank you.
You're welcome. More we know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can conclude, make any closing comments?
No, just in case we're any
Any other questions?
Are you guys still unsure about the 120 radius and how it would fall if it didn't collapse in the middle and buckle?
I mean, I don't know how it's gonna impact the residential development of the future.
Jeff, would you be prepared to answer that?
Staff does not analyze from a safety perspective the safety in the event of a collapse or failure, and we don't have any required safety buffers as outlined in the Land Development Code. So I'm not able to speak directly to that matter. I would defer to the applicant for that. I would say if Laura is able to pull up my screen, I can show you the exhibit where that radius falls and what's in the surrounding areas, and that would be where staff would lead to in terms of exhibit or better clarification here.
It's not in the land development code because we normally cap it at 35 feet, correct?
Well, and we are not regulating the engineering of the pole itself. We are just regulating the civil site work as well as the land and placement on the site. Those are delegated to other entities, but I understand the question in light of the findings being asked.
It's on page 248 of your packets, if you have it. The radius.
Well, the overhead aerial shot of the radius is on 160.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm on 168, 169,
Okay.
and it's got the proposed development and then the radius.
And I think what Charlie's referring to is that development and the property line from Duke's property to this development with the 7 homes that are going in there on that.
Sure.
There's one corner sliver there that's within that radius. If it were to fall in its total length without buckling, they could potentially be, I guess, impacted.
Sure,
Sorry,
so the exhibits here, you can see that to planning's knowledge, although these individual lots have not yet been permitted, so the subdivision has been approved, the plat is currently under review, but zoning permits have not been issued to go vertical with any of the structures. As you can see on the layout here, to everything that's been submitted, the structures themselves would be placed behind the front setback, but are not proposed to be scooched further to the rear of the site, although they are able to be placed anywhere within the building footprint as allowable within those setback lines as you see on the approved 7-lot subdivision there. So we're not able to speak to exactly where those will be placed because the zoning permits have not yet been issued. But you can see what was previously submitted by the applicant as a concept. That being said, then you can see there where that appears to fall would roughly be in the rear of those proposed residential sites. And it's not to say that no structure may be permitted back there. There could be an accessory structure permitted back there. They could have have an addition or a long home, there's nothing to stop them or prohibit them from developing anywhere within the allowable building footprint for the site. But we cannot speak directly to what will come because we haven't seen those plans yet.
But this could potentially impact those future plans, right?
It
Well,
would not
was-
prohibit them.
It looks like if I'm just kind of, I mean, it's difficult, but just eyeballing the comparison, it looks like there's a path forward for that development to proceed without putting the houses within that radius. So, I mean,
If
that's
they
something that
elected
the
to do
developer
so.
needs to probably then kind of account for. Yeah, at this point. I was more wanting to look back to the existing structures there, which seems to be fine. Particularly if there's a safety cause into it that potentially snaps in the middle and then falls probably. But I'm good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we had one person signed up for public comment, but she was mistakenly signed up for this public comment. She meant to sign up for the Sisters of Mercy, so there's no one signed up for public comment for this SUP. So with that being said, I would entertain the motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are out of public hearing, and we proceed to item C7, consider approval of SUP 2024-01, 100 Vine Street.
Okay, let's vote on the required findings of fact. The first is the use meets all required principles and specifications of the code and any adopted land use plans. All in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. Two, the proposed use is developed according to the plan submitted and approved will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. All in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. Three, the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety and will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property located where proposed. All in favor, say unanimous. All right, then is there a motion then to grant the special use permit?
Just a point of clarification, as conditioned,
As
right?
conditioned.
Which would be not still.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Yes. I'm aligned. Yeah.
So moved.
We all agree non-stealth?
I agree.
I agree. I mean, I think it sounds like we could potentially go into a safety concern if one of those pieces were to fall into it. And to be quite honest, I think it would be more noticeable.
Yeah.
Conversation piece.
I think, Councilman Rumpelt made a motion.
So moved. Oh, okay. Motion made by Jason, seconded by Catherine. All those in favor? Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, were you supposed to?
No, that's fine.
Okay,
We'll go back to you.
okay.
I think that's it.
It's unanimous. All right, thank you. It's approved. All right, moving right along, we come to C8, which is public hearing for TA 2025-01 text amendment for site reservations. We have another public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
Motion to go into public hearing.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are in public hearing. Maybe we can wait for the room to clear just a minute before we start.
On a positive note, we should be now speeding up the process to restore power.
Yes, that's true.
Right?
That's true. Yes, hopefully. You want to take a 5-minute recess?
I think so.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Council and Mayor Pro Tem. This is public hearing for text amendment 2025.01, the site reservations text amendment. The goal of the request is to ensure desirability and usefulness for the city's needs and its long-range vision as we look specifically to site reservations that might be owned by the city of Belmont or other community entities. This text amendment is also meant to serve as a means of clarity and structure for the dedication process itself during the plan review. So just a bit of background, council requested that planning staff take a look at the land development code at its October 2024 workshop, asking staff to review the language and propose a text amendment if it was needed in order to strengthen the standards on site reservations to be dedicated to the city of Belmont. So beginning in November of 2024, staff started our review and noted specific areas where this was mentioned and what it already covered, as well as some areas where we could maybe further clarify that process. Ultimately, we presented the first draft of the site reservations text amendment to Planning Board in April of 2025, and through some discussion with them, there were some modifications that are now included in what's presented to you this evening. In staff's analysis, the Land Development Code currently already requires site plans to reflect details that are outlined in long-range plans if they're referenced, and that includes noting site reservations for any identified parks, public building sites, any infrastructure, right-of-way, etc. But our current language does not outline those specific requirements that would be necessary in order for them to be served or to be utilized for the various specific purposes. So for instance, there are no specific regulations for a piece of property that might be identified as a potential future public safety site versus a site that might be identified for a future public park or any other various purpose as identified in our long-range plans. So, planning staff coordinated with Public Works and Engineering and is ultimately proposing that instead of defining a consistent set of standards that we might have on a piece of land to be dedicated to the city of Belmont, that we work with the development community in order to specify and detail out, depending on what the site-specific needs are in that specific area of our community, in order to make sure that those details are clearly defined and outlined in the schematic plan review process, also known as conditional zoning. So when we have a project that's going through conditional zoning, at that time we would specify the exact standards we'd like to see and be able to outline those up front and get them incorporated into the conditions of approval. Once this occurs, as currently drafted, these standards would be verified during the construction plan review to make sure that they are still incorporated into the plans that are prepared, and verified again prior to the city's final acceptance by members of both the engineering and inspections teams. In order to do this, there are some modifications that are needed to about 5 different subsections here, but ultimately they impact Chapter 15 and Chapter 16. And we just want to highlight that our ordinance does already cover some of this stuff very well, but with everything there's always some room for improvement, and so that is the goal of this text amendment here this evening. So what's already done well in those chapters, many sections within Chapter 16 mention general requirements that we would have for open space as well as site reservations. Chapter 16 gives some examples as to the types of reservations that should be considered and reviewed during the plan review process. And open space is referenced as early on as sketch plan in Chapter 16. However, not all site reservations are referenced as early. So what does the code not currently do well? Most references in Chapter 15 and 16 lack specific detail into when and what requirements would be needed at which stage of the plan review process. Chapters 15 and 16 also do not currently reference any sort of site testing or verification that might be required or desired prior to final approval and dedication of those pieces of lands to the city of Belmont. So what are the standards that we want that piece of land or property to have prior to its dedication to the city for ongoing maintenance? It also has some examples of site reservations, but could use some expanding on exactly what that should include or encompass. And so we are proposing that as part of the proposed text modifications in your packet this evening. So we'll go through each specific subsection just to make sure that we are providing some clarity as to the proposed recommendations in there. In chapter 15.4, there's currently no mention of open space or site reservation, specifically in this subsection or chapter. So planning staff is recommending language to clarify that the location and size of site reservations should begin at the sketch plan phase. So not just open space, but the site reservation should also be discussed during the first pass of sketch plan, when we get the first conceptual idea.
And is that typically more of a negotiation with the developer, or are there minimum standards? For instance, if you've got a major development like, say, Belmont 2 or 3,
Yep.
you know, that, is there any stipulation that says, yes, we want a public park there, and we want it to be a minimum of 12 acres? Or, yes, we need a public station, you know, public safety station there, it needs to be a minimum of 6 acres. Anything like that as far as minimum standards?
Sure, so the planning department doesn't outline specific standards that might be needed for our various other departments within the city. So we would look to any additional or supportive adopted plans. So for instance, the fire department just did the recent fire capacity study. We know that there is a Parks and Recreation master plan. So if there are any of those plans that outline a specific need or desire, that would be planning department's first step into noting if there are any required specifications like that that we need to know up front. So that's the first pass, right, that we would look at in the sketch plan review phase. But we know that the conversation doesn't stop there, and that our needs are constantly being updated in order to meet the needs of our community. So we want to make sure that there's an evolving conversation with all of the departments. And so as you'll see, what's recommended here is that we start the conversation in sketch plan about the fact that there might be a site reservation desired or needed, but the conversation doesn't stop at sketch plan. And a lot of times what you would anticipate is that those site reservations would be on larger pieces of property that would be utilizing the conditional zoning or schematic plan process for conditional zoning approval to come to council. And that's when those details can be further defined and negotiated between what the developer is able to do on the site, what the city's minimum levels of acceptance would be, and that all parties are on the same page prior to project approval. And so we'll get into exactly where that's outlined and what types of things that are being proposed in the current text amendment. But that is the thought, that the conversations start at sketch plan, but just like the rest of the project, it's not where they end. It's just to make sure that we're having those dialogues up front as early as possible when somebody comes to the door, especially if there's a long-range plan that identifies a need that we have, regardless of what department that need is identifying in. So, again, the purpose of this early on is to allow for that early feedback, right? So if there was a plan that was adopted that said, well, we need a park here, but since that time of plan adoption, maybe a park has been located just down the street, we don't really need a park there anymore, right? Let's find out early on, or vice versa, if that's really been a struggle, we still need that, what kind of park? Is it passive, is it amenitized? We can have those conversations early on. So that's the goal with trying to just clarify that we should be having these points of discussion in the sketch plan review place. Chapter 16.4 further notes this. So this is the section that talks about conformance with adopted plans. So section A specifically talks about open space. So open space can also be dedicated to the city. It doesn't have to be, but it is an area where it can be for use like a public park. It can also be donated to other entities that's outlined in Chapter 7. So, for instance, if a developer wanted to make an open space land dedication to the Catawba Lands Conservancy, that's allowable in our code as long as it's someone that can uphold the standards as outlined in there. But what we're recommending is that there's clarification added to this section that if someone is proposing to dedicate land, whether that's to the city of Belmont or to another community entity, that we have this discussion to verify that the entity that is being proposed to receive the land is also willing to accept that land. right? And so that planning staff knows up front, if there are certain standards that the site needs to meet in order to be properly transferred, we can go ahead and have that as part of our plan review to ensure that those details are incorporated, right? So if an entity, for instance, wanted to only accept that land if less than a certain number of trees was removed from the site, we would want to know that up front so that we don't jeopardize the ability for the project to ultimately dedicate what they're hoping to dedicate to the entity looking to ultimately be the landholder of that. So having those conversations early on, the goal here is just to clarify that and make sure that they are having a conversation with who they plan on dedicating this land to upfront as well, so that everybody's in the loop. And then the other change here is proposed in section C, and here we're recommending clarification in the timeline. Specifically, there is a section already in our code that talks about reservation of school sites and other public buildings. These are for primarily projects that are over a certain size. The developers are required to notify and or check in with the schools or other entities to say, hey, look, I'm adding this much volume. If you're interested, they are not required to dedicate that land, but they're required to notify in the event that certain entities want to purchase land and or negotiate for a portion of that in order to serve that proposed development. They're required to notify. The current code says they notify, and then that entity has up to 18 months to take action on securing a portion of that site. Otherwise, they are freed from any requirement to reserve any portion of that for future encumbrance by another entity. We are proposing just to clarify that to say, if those conversations are going on and a project is going through conditional zoning and there's conditions of approval or a development agreement, that we wouldn't be limited to the 18-month cutoff rule, but that in fact would be referenced in whatever the conditional approval would be or the length of the development agreement. Again, because we are proposing to have these conversations further up front than we have in the past, the hope is that all parties would know if there's somebody interested, what the need would be, how much land there would need to be, and if someone is going to utilize that caveat within the code. Yes?
Sorry, regarding the reservation for school sites, is that a City of Belmont requirement that they notify, for instance, the Gaston County School Board? Is that a City of Belmont requirement?
That may also stem from the state. I would need to check in with you. That is linked from somewhere.
And do you know if historically that has been enforced?
I do not know of a time it has been utilized in terms of whether in terms of the schools actually electing to proceed with reservation, at least here in Belmont. I'm not to say that it hasn't happened anywhere else in Gaston County with any larger projects. I'm just not aware that that option has been utilized at the City of Belmont level.
I mean, if it's a state requirement, it'd just be nice to know if it's actually, if it just exists in code or if it's actually being enforced, because we all know we have issues with capacity in our schools.
Right, and developers so that would be our responsibility to make sure that they're notified. What they do with that notification beyond that point would then be a private matter.
Yeah.
But it would be helpful to have that conversation continue to be a part of our upfront plan reviews, and that's why we wanted to make sure we clarified it in section C, and that we didn't limit it to a strict 18-month if we were having those conversations and had otherwise conditions that outlined whether it's 24 months or 36 months or whatever that may be. In code, there are some phased development projects that the vesting period extends to 7 years, so we do want to make sure that we understand that we do have some bigger pieces of property that might have a multi-phased approach, so it's important to make sure that our conditions are consistent with the vesting that's allowable at the state level as well. All right, so in chapter 16.7, specifically talking about these sketch plan requirements, again, planning staff is recommending just some clarification, and we're proposing to do that by adding an additional bullet point here, 16.7F. You can see that in the redlined text included in your packet. Specifically just noting that the general size and location of site reservations is required to be shown on sketch plans. It's not to say that they're going to get it right when they submit a sketch plan, but it just starts that conversation. If it's shown in a long-range plan, it starts the conversation to say, is that enough? Is it cited appropriately? Does that meet the department's needs? It allows us to get that feedback as early on as possible. In 16.8, again, this is when we're prepping things to go to conditional zoning. These are our schematic design plan requirements. This is where we're recommending the bulk of the clarification. Specifically, our department is recommending that the details of the site reservations, whatever those may be determined to be, are outlined and included as part of the schematic conditions of approval. And some ideas, but we don't want to limit it to this, could include specific locations and sizing of utility connections or other infrastructure, any landscaping needs, whether that's plantings prior to dedication and or maintenance agreements, any amenities that are desired or required to be installed prior to full dedication of the site, timing for that dedication, whether or not it should be dedicated and prepped prior to other development within the project coming online or at the very end of the project, if there's a specified year for desired turnover, all of those things as we're looking at capital improvements and budgeting for maintenance, making sure we have that as part of the conversation. The specific location, if it's off of a collector road, for instance, if it doesn't matter, if there's anything that needs to be directly adjacent to that site in order to make sure that it's meeting its maximum potential. If there's any minimum lot size or dimensions, so for instance, we know for identifying a public safety station, for instance, there are some factors that need to be considered in terms of turning radiuses of vehicles, depth, maybe the maximum allowable slope of that property to accommodate the need for practical use of that site for quick and efficient emergency access. So we want to make sure those things are upfront and discussed, because it could be that those needs ultimately say, well, we were envisioning this to be located in this particular area of the site, but that site has very high slopes, so we may need to look at an alternative location in order to make sure it meets all of the other requirements that you have for practical utilization of that piece of property for your desired need. So all of those things are proposed to be talked about and incorporated into the conditions of approval at the site-specific level, because what we might need for a public safety station in the peninsula might be very different than what the needs are specifically in the North Belmont area. And so we think this is the most appropriate time to have those conversations, work with the development community about understanding what our exact needs are and what we will require prior to their dedication and turnover for us to take that responsibility on as a city. And we did talk with Planning and Zoning Board at those meetings. Again, I told you we initially brought this to them in April and then followed back up in May. And they agreed that this is the most relevant time for those decisions to be made and then just verified during construction plan review so that everybody has that information as upfront and transparently as possible. So then to follow up on that, in chapter 16.9 for construction document requirements, we are just recommending the expansion of the site reservation examples, just to list a few more about it, make sure it's clear that this covers all of those types. And then adding a section in there simply that states that site reservations will be reviewed at construction plans to ensure accuracy with all of the conditions outlined during that schematic phase. So just reinforcing that we are going to follow those through, whatever's decided at conditional zoning, we're going to carry that through on the administrative review, and then also follow up prior to dedication so that you all know we've checked and verified that anything that's been mutually agreed upon is in fact been performed on that site prior to you being requested to take that over. So ultimately, the red line text before you tonight has been presented to Planning Board at the May 15th meeting and unanimously approved as presented with a vote of 5-0. Planning and Zoning Board found that the text amendment as proposed is reasonable and in the public interest and consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan in the areas of parks and recreation and infrastructure. And with that, staff is asking council to receive our report, Planning Board's recommendation, any public comments this evening, and ultimately make a motion to approve as presented, approve as modified, or disapprove, and requesting that you make the two findings required, one that it's in a reasonable request and in the public's interest, and the other that it's consistent with the goals as outlined in the comprehensive land use plan.
Thank you. Any questions for Tiffany?
No, this was one of the text amendments of many that I had asked for, particularly when you think about pieces of property the city has acquired over the years. Aber Falls one, Del Webb, and Pittenger one is one in the swamp, where it's these lands that are gifted or given to the city, are they even usable? So trying to get the conversations. A good one to think about more recently is going to be Pittenger 2 and 3 with the public safety side. Is the turn radius right? Is the slope too deep for the city to be able to afford anything? So again, just to kind of give some context, and I appreciate y'all working on this one for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
There is no one signed up for public comment, so if there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are out of public hearing. That brings us to C9. Consider approval of an ordinance for TA 2025-01 site reservations text amendment. I had a few non-substantive edits to the ordinance. Were those incorporated?
Yes, and the corrected version is available on iCompass.
Okay.
And what were those edits, just so I understand?
I've got them.
Yeah, I think that there
You
was.
said non-substantive. Is it just for grammatic?
Yeah.
There's no like actual changing in what Tiffany just wrote?
No, Miles has them if you want to take a look.
Okay.
All right, that said, I'll entertain a motion to approve the text amendment as presented.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Jason. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. I'll also entertain a motion to find the text amendment a reasonable request and consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan in the areas of parks and recreation and infrastructure.
So moved.
Motion by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Also passes unanimously. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
But your night is not over yet. We have one more item, C10, designate council representatives to participate in pre-qualified transportation consultant interviews.
Yes, I'd like to turn this item over to Reagan Murphy.
The night is finished.
You're like that gymnast who waited the whole night just to do the pommel horse.
For the one event.
Yes, and win the medal.
We
So
can set a 5-minute timer.
My
As
pleasure.
streamlined as possible. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm here tonight just to invite council to participate in interviews to select pre-qualified transportation consultants to provide transportation consulting services on call to the city. We use these services for a variety of purposes. Primarily, these services are leveraged by our development project teams, when they are required to complete a traffic study or do a TIA as part of their project. We also use these services as a city on occasion, whether we're leading our own projects, such as for the City Rec Center, or other projects, or we're developing transportation grants, looking for assistance with project design, modeling, permitting, that sort of thing. So historically, we've had a single on-call firm that we select through this process. And with this process, we brought this to y'all during a retreat in February of this year. But we're looking this time around to select several firms that we will pre-qualify to do this work for the city. We're hoping to offer just additional flexibility and cost effectiveness both to the city and our development community as a result of this. And what we're proposing is that we allow development teams to either select just directly their preferred firm from the list if they have an existing relationship with an engineering firm, or they can solicit cost estimates from our pre-qualified consultants and then select based on that for their project. Our selection process, we opened the RFQ on May 1st and it closed on May 29th, so it was open for 4 weeks. We had 9 proposals submitted. Staff is currently reviewing and scoring those proposals as a first pass to select the firms that will proceed to an oral interview. And we're hoping to invite up to 2 council members to be designated to participate in those interviews the week of June 16th. And after that, we'll present those final selections
through a collection of master services agreements to you all for approval at your July 7th meeting. So with that, I invite you to take the following action. Designate up to 2 members to sit on our interview panels. We've identified 3 windows for interviews, both to accommodate additional flexibility for council members who might be interested, and potentially to offer a wider range to our firms that are selected, but it's highly unlikely that we will fill all 9 of these hours with interviews. So just want to caveat that. So with that, I will yield to questions.
Thank you, Reagan. And I'll just say, we talked about this at the retreat, and for various reasons of, pricing and whatnot, wanted to do this, but I want to say that certainly it's not a knock on Kimley Horn, who's been doing this since I've been here, and I feel they do a very good job, and I'm assuming we're going to hear from them on Thursday.
Absolutely.
But it's also understood why we're doing this, but I just want to make it clear that, at least from my perspective, there's nothing that I'm dissatisfied about with what Kimley Horn has done.
Absolutely. From the planning department side, we feel the same way. We enjoy working with them. We just want to be able to offer as much flexibility as possible.
All right. Well,
Any takers?
any takers?
I will be at the beach that week.
Yeah, I would love to participate, but unfortunately I'm going to be out that week.
And then forward through.
Well, Jim and Catherine, it's you two then. I have a completely booked up that Monday, June 16th, and I have a 6.5-hour meeting on Tuesday with work, so I will not be able to participate.
It's a good day to call in.
Jim, I'll check my paper calendar when I get home. Me and you, buddy.
All right. All right.
I would like to participate, but I also
Yes.
agree with what you were saying, Jim. This isn't a reflection on the quality of work from Kimberly Horn, but rather the cost effectiveness to the city of Belmont.
All right, well, I don't know if I'm available all 9 hours, but
No, absolutely not.
I'll
Yeah.
check and see, but I'll be around.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
And Catherine too. Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you are set on those particular days?
We are for now. If we need to open up more availability later in the week, we can look to do that for sure. So
But it will be that week, for sure.
it'll be that week. Yeah, that'll allow us enough time to prep the agreements with the consulting firms and get it turned around for your July 7th agenda. All right, and I can always follow up too with Mayor Pro Tem Catherine and Councilwoman Lewis directly to make sure that scheduling is good to go. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving along, that brings us to D1, other business. Let's start with Jason.
Okay. Just a few items. First off, congratulations to Chief Kennedy. I think he's still in the room. We're excited to have you on board, and many thanks to Miles and staff for this kind of quite a arduous process, but it was an excellent hire. I think it was well worth the wait, so thank you all. Also, wanted to send out kudos to Jack Wall, Jonathan, if you could maybe pass them along to him. At our KBB meeting last week, their board couldn't rave enough about Jack and his workers downtown with the jobs that they did with installing the flowers and the irrigation and such with the planters all throughout downtown Belmont. They were all especially recognized, and the board's very grateful for their work. I think several of us were at the Memorial Day ceremony at Greenwood Cemetery this past week. One of the things that was brought up to me from one of the former commanders of the Post 144 American Legion and the current commander is the World War I memorial that's right inside the entrance at Greenwood Cemetery. It's a tall monument there, and it's got a kind of a stone wall around it, and it's kind of crumbling, falling into disrepair. Some of the chain sections have fallen down. And so we just kind of talked out loud about, maybe there's a way for the city and maybe the local post, to maybe collaborate on, see what we can do to dress that area up, whether it's, repairing the stone wall or maybe doing some more landscaping around it. they're open to those possibilities as well, so I would request that maybe we could entertain that. Let's see, the last thing is, and I know Catherine and I, we live in Belmead, and it's been brought to Miles's attention and Chief Falls as well about an incident that we had in our neighborhood last week, and one of many we seem to have from excessive speeding. We would like to have, and I think Chief Falls has actually already put out the speed, I'll get this wrong, but the device that records.
The stealth
Stealth stats, yeah. But I think we've kind of started down the road of, and I think we've got several of these lined up, but requesting a speed study within the Belmead neighborhood.
Yeah, correct. From when you reached out to me about the speeding in Belmead, I looked at the traffic calming policy, and given that the policy is written the way it is, that it stops at the point if this is considered, if Belmead Circle is considered a primary public service or emergency route, and it is that, and so we can't move on with inside the process of the policy. But the policy does state with council's direction to staff, then we can take it to the next step. And so that's I guess the reason why you're bringing it up, that to get council to direct staff to take it to the next step in the process.
So does that need a motion or just direction?
We could, I'm trying to think, if you, we probably don't need a motion, you want direction, just direction from council to let us take it to the next step.
Okay. Anyone have any issues with that?
Let's do it.
All right. Yeah, we have, well, I won't go into details. We've had several incidents of near misses in the neighborhood, so it's long overdue. That's all I have, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one thing. I just want to congratulate you, Chief, on your new position. We're looking forward to having you.
Two things. So congrats, Chief. Excited to see what you can do. And then lastly, I want to say a very heartfelt thank you to Miles for all the work he did for the MAP 7 proclamation. That was, it meant a lot to me, and I know that meant a lot to the families. So I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Alex.
Thank you, Jim. Just a few things. Again, echoing my colleagues, congratulations. Really looking forward to working with you and what you have to bring to Belmont. At the last MPO session, just to give everyone a heads up, we discussed recent legislation that's being passed by the state, one of which is a potential conversation in reducing the power bill tax that municipalities will be allowed to charge. Others included, as we know, with strengthening the no-down zoning, even though they've been talking about repealing it. So we asked the Gaston, Cleveland, and Lincoln County MPO, we asked staff to look into, does the MPO or local MPOs have the authority to draft resolutions? Because we'd like to send a resolution between the three counties, and all municipalities agree to our legislatures to say, look, Gaston, Cleveland, and Lincoln do not agree with what you're doing at the state legislature level. So just a heads up to you all.
Was that regarding the power bill tax and the down zone?
Yeah, oh yeah, both of them. But actually, we have a number of them, right? So, but we figured, you know, in one municipality, two municipalities sending it's one thing, but if we have a conglomerate of three counties coming together, then we should have a bigger voice there. Just a real quick one ahead of Thursday. When we were presented the sewer capacity study for the remaining of the city, we had discussed at that time between the 2-year, 5-year, and 10-year. I do think it would be interesting to see, it sounded like the data was readily available, what the 5-year looked like in regards to the piping around the area in East Belmont, particularly the area going into the sewer capacity, or excuse me, the plant. If we all recall, we were just presented on the 2-year storm event as opposed to the 5-year was what they presented on. And I don't know if you need maybe other council members. I think that's going to be important data, and I just want to call it out ahead of time before we discuss and meet on the Crescent project. So, but we had discussed during that meeting to look at the 5-year. So, is that
software?
Yeah, that raises an interesting point, because I've had some folks ask me, well, it was their understanding was it's a study, so is there a report like we had from the sewer study that was done on the peninsula that, you know, would be a public record that somebody could come and look at? I understand that a model has been developed, but is there actually some sort of report somewhere that these are the conclusions and these are the inputs and this is what it shows?
We did talk about a final report of this project maybe a month ago. And what I recall, and maybe staff can help me out if I'm not correct, but what I recall is that Withers was completing their Lucid model along with the comp plan. And once that Lucid model was complete, then they could prepare the final sewer capacity study report for us. Is that right? Am I saying that right, Kevin?
That was one thing, but they did ask about, they needed to know whether we wanted to go with the 2 or the 5 for the report.
For the design standards of a 2 or 5.
I would assume based on, I mean, if we need to make it official, but it seems as though what everyone has talked about since the day it was presented was the 5.
Yeah. Planning, seems like we were talking about funding for the 2, but planning for the 5, if I had that verbiage correct, it was
and
kind of like a two-phase.
it's a lot of information to kind of recall, you know, in this setting right here without having information in front of me, but the 5-year, I think the 5-year storm, we wanted to know exactly what that meant as far as like, could we actually state that we want to design towards 5-year storm? Because right now, I mean, I particularly don't know if that's what the cost of that is. So I don't think it's fair for us to say, yes, let's out of the blue say 5-year storm without us having more information. So that's kind of my standpoint on it. I don't know that we want to say, yes, right now, 5-year storm. If you're looking for like data, I think that Withers Ravenel can give us the data, but as far as like what our standards are in the future.
It was more or less talking about the data, because they presented on the 2-year, and there was a nice chart in regards that showed all of our existing and active lines and what was at capacity and what wasn't, but that was at 2 years. So I'd be curious to see what lines are at capacity at 5 years, considering in the 2-year, they said happened 9 times.
Right.
In the last 2 years, so.
That's only like 3 months.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, certainly it's not a memory test or you know.
No.
I think that's fair. I'd also be curious, we approved a contract, did we not? For this study, what does that indicate the output would be? What does the contract say that's supposed to be?
As far as like the final report?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get a final report.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just not prepared yet. That's what I'm saying, like, they wanted to wait until later on when the Lucid model was complete. Am I correct with that?
Well, really, they just wanted direction from us. Do you want to write it based on a 2-year or 5-year? Because it changes.
Yeah.
That was the last talk, John.
So now I feel like it's a chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
You know.
So they said, but a 2-year storm that's a good level of service, is what they were saying, but they can change it for 5. It's a rare thing, but they can change
So
it.
they can give you like almost 2 final reports,
It was
2-year, 5-year.
Yeah.
and just one.
Yeah.
If we can do both, that would be great.
Let us see if we can get with Withers to see how long it will take to finalize a report and get back to you.
Okay. And obviously also if they say, well, if you want us to do both, that'll be an additional X
Maybe.
thousands of dollars that would.
Just throwing it in.
Well, X amount of time, too.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you're thinking about Thursday?
Well, I don't have
I think if we can get the data associated with what the capacity is at a 5-year, which sounds like we may have that regularly. I don't know. Look, the way I looked at it is when we were doing this capacity study, we were trying to understand with the upcoming developments within the area, whether or not our capacity, or excuse me, our existing active lines can support it. So.
That was one of the stuff.
And then the conversation on that was, I had thought, not saying planning to 5, I remember what you were talking about, but I remember what Miles said is we need to discuss that, and I agree, depending on the financing of what those projects are. But as it pertains to today, I think it'd still be nice to understand what does the 5-year rain event look like in a simulation for this area. That's what I was trying to get at.
So it seems, I think Withers is coming to the meeting on this coming Thursday. Tiffany's shaking her head yes. And so we'll get with Withers to see if they can prepare the 5-year data.
Is it still going to be
on
for that 3 months?
Thursday. I'm sorry.
Is that going to be based on that 3-month window that they did the study?
I think so, because it was all based on like their flow data. Yeah. So we can,
Okay, cool. And then, I guess the only other thing, again, Charlie, thank you for bringing forth that proclamation and staff working on that. I think that was really nice. And then just one last thing, did we ever get any confirmation, I'm a dog with a bone, on the Dell Web monitoring systems, particularly that were requested for the conditional use for its approval?
I know I asked staff that we need to get that. I have not seen any data at this point. Jonathan?
We don't have the data yet, but they are in place.
Okay. Can we get the data?
We will continue to work on it, yes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. That's all I have, John.
Thank you. I just, the only thing I have, I'll also welcome Chief Kennedy. I hope they warned you about these meetings. This is actually a short one. So just be prepared.
Whenever you see the acronym stop, just, that might be a good night to skip.
Any development on that?
Yeah. All right. Well, that is all I have. And again, it's a busy week. We'll see everyone back here in 72 hours, or less than 72 hours, 5 o'clock Thursday for our special meeting / workshop for June dealing with the Crescent project. So get some sleep tonight the next few days. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Jason, seconded by Alex. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.